John Miller was an ordinary janitor at the military academy, a quiet man who swept halls that echoed with commands and boots. His worn hands carried both the mop and the memories of his late wife, who had passed away years earlier, leaving him alone with his little girl, Emily. Every morning, John polished the brass plaques and cleaned the marble floors before the cadets arrived. No one really noticed him, except for his soft smile and the tiny silver ring he wore, the only keepsake from his wife. To others, he was invisible, but he carried a world of love within. Emily, his 7-year-old daughter, was the reason John woke up each morning. She had inherited her mother's eyes and an unshakable curiosity about everything. On weekends, John brought her to the academy's courtyard, where she played with a small wooden horse while he finished his work. She also wore a small silver ring, identical to John's, engraved with a symbol of 2 intertwined wings. It wasn't valuable, but to them, it was sacred. They called it their family bond, a circle that nothing could break. One rainy morning, an unexpected announcement stirred the academy. A high-ranking general was visiting for an inspection. General Robert Hayes was known for his discipline and sharp instincts. Every officer trembled in his presence. John didn't expect to see him. Janitors stayed in the background, unnoticed. But fate had other plans that day. While cleaning the corridor near the command office, John accidentally bumped into the general himself, spilling a bucket of water at the officer's feet. Time seemed to freeze as the general turned to glare at him. John immediately apologized, bowing his head, expecting anger or dismissal. But before the general could speak, something shimmered in the light, the silver ring on John's finger. The general's eyes widened for a brief second, then narrowed as if searching his memory. "Where did you get that ring?" he demanded. John hesitated, surprised by the tone. "It belonged to my wife," he said quietly. "She gave me one, and my daughter has the other." The general's face turned pale, and he asked softly, "You said, your daughter has this ring too?" That single question changed everything. The general dismissed everyone around them and asked John to follow him to his private office. The janitor's heart pounded. He didn't understand what was happening. Inside, the general took off his glove and showed his own hand. There, gleaming under the dim light, was the exact same ring, same symbol, same engraving. "This ring," the general said slowly, "was given to me by my sister before she disappeared 20 years ago." John froze. His wife had never spoken much about her family, only that she was orphaned young. A chill ran down John's spine. Could it be possible? The general asked for his late wife's name, and when John said, "Anna," Hayes's eyes filled with tears. "Anna Hayes," he whispered. "My sister." For years, the general had believed she'd died in a car accident while traveling abroad. But she had survived, changed her name, and built a new life far away, until fate took her too soon. Now, standing before him was the man she had loved and the niece he never knew existed. The general's stoic posture broke, and he sat in silence, trembling. John couldn't believe it. The general, one of the most powerful men in the army, was his brother-in-law. They spoke for hours as Hayes asked about Anna's final years, about Emily, and about the life they had lived in quiet struggle. John told him everything, how Anna worked in a small bakery, how illness took her too early, and how he had raised Emily alone, cleaning halls to give her a decent education. Hayes listened, his hands shaking. "You've done more for her than anyone could," he said. "You've done what I failed to do, protect her family." When Emily came to the academy that afternoon, John introduced her to the general. The little girl stood shyly behind her father, clutching her small ring. Hayes knelt down, his eyes glistening. "May I see your ring, young lady?" he asked gently. Emily nodded and showed him. The general placed his own ring beside hers, they matched perfectly. Tears streamed down his face. "You have your mother's eyes," he whispered. Emily smiled innocently, unaware that she had just met her mother's brother, a man who had searched for that lost connection his entire life. Word quickly spread through the academy, the janitor was related to General Hayes. At first, people thought it was a rumor. But soon, the truth was confirmed when the general began visiting John regularly, sometimes even sharing lunch in the staff cafeteria. Officers were stunned to see the general chatting warmly with a janitor. Yet, Hayes treated John with the same respect he gave any soldier. "Family is not measured by rank," he said once. "It's measured by love, and this man has more courage than most men in uniform." Over the next few weeks, the general's visits became frequent. He brought small gifts for Emily, books, a teddy bear, even a school scholarship form. But John hesitated. "Sir," he said one evening, "I appreciate everything, but Emily and I are used to simple lives." Hayes smiled. "And you deserve more, brother." The word, brother, felt strange but comforting. It broke down years of loneliness. Emily began calling Hayes, Uncle Robert, and his once cold heart melted every time she ran into his arms. One day, during a military ceremony, Hayes invited John and Emily to sit in the front row. The officers whispered among themselves, no janitor had ever been honored like this. As the band played, Hayes stepped to the podium and cleared his throat. "Today," he began, "I honor not just soldiers but those who fight silent battles. Mr. John Miller, a man of dignity and love, showed me what true service means, not in uniform but in spirit." The hall erupted in applause, and John, blushing deeply, could only hold Emily's hand. After the ceremony, Hayes presented John with a medal, not for military service but for extraordinary humanity. Tears filled John's eyes as he accepted it. "I only did what any father would do," he said humbly. "You did more," Hayes replied. "You kept our family alive." Emily proudly watched, clapping harder than anyone else. That moment became a turning point not just for them, but for everyone who witnessed it, a reminder that honor isn't found in status but in love and resilience. Weeks passed, and life began to change for the better. The general often invited John and Emily to his mansion on the hill, where Emily played in gardens she had only seen in storybooks. John, however, felt out of place among the marble floors and chandeliers. Hayes noticed and said, "You belong here just as much as anyone. Anna would have wanted this." Those words softened John's heart. Slowly, the three began to form a bond, not one built on blood alone, but on understanding and shared loss. The mansion, once silent and cold, now echoed with laughter. Emily started attending one of the best schools in the city thanks to Hayes's recommendation. On her first day, she wore a clean uniform that Hayes had personally bought. She hugged her father tightly before entering the gates, whispering, "I'll make you proud, Daddy." John smiled, though his eyes glistened. As he returned to the academy, broom in hand, people now greeted him with respect. He hadn't changed, he still swept the same halls, but people looked at him differently. Dignity had always been his, now, others could finally see it. 2. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Hayes visited John's small house on the outskirts of town. It was modest, filled with warmth and Emily's drawings pinned to the walls. Over a simple dinner, Hayes confessed, "For years, I served the country, but I forgot to serve my own heart. You reminded me what family truly means." John smiled softly. "And you reminded me that kindness still exists beyond loss." They raised their glasses, not in luxury, but in gratitude. That night, two men who had once lived in loneliness became brothers again. Months later, Emily came home excitedly waving a letter. "Daddy, Uncle Robert, my essay won first prize," she shouted. The topic was, "A hero in my life," and she had written about her father, the janitor who never gave up. When Hayes read the essay, tears filled his eyes. "You see, John," he said, voice trembling, "you've been a hero all along." John chuckled, trying to hide his emotions. "Heroes wear many uniforms," he said, "mine just happens to come with a mop." It became one of Hayes's favorite quotes, one he'd later repeat in speeches. Time healed old wounds, but it also brought new opportunities. Hayes, approaching retirement, began planning to open a charitable foundation in Anna's name, one that would support single parents and orphans. "We'll call it the Silverwing Foundation," he said, pointing to the design of the rings. John was speechless. "You'd really do that?" Hayes nodded. "It's not charity, it's family legacy." Emily proudly drew the logo, two silver wings forming a heart. That symbol, once personal, was now becoming a beacon of hope for others. The foundation grew quickly. John helped with logistics, cleaning, organizing, and meeting the families who came for support. He found joy in helping others the way he once needed help. Hayes often introduced him as, "My brother, the man who taught me humility." At first, John laughed at the title, but soon he carried it with pride. Reporters came to cover their story, the general and the janitor, they called it, and people were moved to tears. Their bond inspired many to look past appearances and see the humanity within. Years passed, and Emily blossomed into a bright young woman. She graduated with honors, wearing a pendant shaped like the silver ring. During her speech, she said, "My father taught me that greatness doesn't come from what you have, but what you give." Hayes, sitting in the front row, wiped his eyes. John smiled proudly, clutching his late wife's photo in his pocket. Anna's legacy lived on, through Emily's kindness, Hayes's compassion, and John's unwavering love. The three of them had rewritten the meaning of family. One quiet evening after Emily's graduation, Hayes and John sat on a park bench overlooking the academy where it all began. "Funny, isn't it?" John said. "This all started because of a ring." Hayes smiled. "No," he said softly. "It started because of love that refused to be forgotten." They sat in silence, watching the sunset reflect off the silver rings on their fingers. The world had changed around them, but those small circles still held the weight of their story, proof that fate works in mysterious, beautiful ways. As the years went by, Hayes eventually retired and spent his final days surrounded by the family he'd once thought lost forever. John continued working part-time at the foundation, mentoring younger fathers who had lost their way. Emily became a social worker, guiding children who needed love most. Every year, on Anna's birthday, they gathered to light a candle beside her portrait, their silver rings gleaming in the flame's glow. In those moments, silence spoke louder than words, a promise that love never truly dies. When people asked about the story behind the rings, Emily would smile and say, "It's a reminder that family isn't found, it's rediscovered." The janitor, the general, and the little girl had woven a story the world would never forget. What began as an accident in a hallway became a legacy of compassion. The silver rings, once symbols of sorrow, now shone with hope. And though time would pass and faces would change, the bond they shared remained unbroken, proving that even the smallest act of fate can rewrite a lifetime.